Hello friends, today we're going to do another fun training video, but this time it's going to be over portions of the treatment plan. And I'm going to break this down because there's a lot of things that the treatment plans include. And I hope after the end of this video, you have a greater understanding of why we're asking for some of the stuff that we're asking on the treatment plan, what we're looking for and what an auditor is going to look for, and maybe some tips and tricks to kind of move through this in a conversational way. So again, I'm up here in our famous test subject client. And for the sake of this, I am just going to use the outpatient treatment plan line. If you're in IRT, again, your treatment plan is on the IRT assessment. And if you're an outpatient, you're using the outpatient one. If you're interested in why it's different, you're going to look right over here and see that the fees are different. So outpatient bills on a fee-for-service model, which means we get paid per service, a select fee, and IRT is a per diem. So we get paid just the same amount every day for a client kind of being in that, that program. We don't get paid per service. So to keep the balances of the clients kind of accurate, then we really want to make sure we use the right one. So in outpatient, what's important as always is that I check the client in. I'm going to have today's date and the time. Yes, I'm working a little late tonight. That's all right. And you'll see immediately that that total balance went up $50 because, like I said, the client didn't give me any money, but this added $50 to his bill, which triggers Miranda, our lovely billing specialist, to figure out how to bill for him. All righty. After that point, I go and I hover over the document and it says the treatment plan update. That's exactly what I want. And I'm going to click that. And here there's a screen that should look fairly familiar to you all. And it gives me an option to do one of two things. If this is a treatment plan update, I can literally hit copy archive document and it's going to produce a carbon copy of the document I created before. Because I'm going to pretend like this is a brand new client and I'm developing a brand new treatment plan, I'm going to hit create new document. And this won't have any information on it that's new. Whatever's in green, I say that, right? And then all this green stuff shows up. This is the thread. So anything that is green is something that is developed by ReliaTrax to be a thread. Remember, if you're a clinician, you hear me and probably your schools preach and preach the golden thread. We want commonalities between our documentation that link them together. And ReliaTrax intervention for that is to create the thread. Maybe I should not work this late. If you come up into their icon bar, it's actually this green little thread that says client thread. And this gives you a, I can click into it. There we go. It gives you a timeline of when these goals were created. I can click in there and see that I created this on the 17th. Roman created goal number 1. That's very descriptive there, Roman, on January 15th of this year. And so this is the thread. And that's why those were showing up. If I wanted to delete these, I can kind of go in there and delete those. Let's see, I may not be able to delete. Not sure why I'm not able to delete I don't think everybody has the opportunity to do this because we could really mess up some stuff if we were able to get in and delete things from the thread. But I want you to see kind of what that does. So let's go back to our test subject. We're going to go here. And we're back. So these are just pieces of the thread. If you need to delete something from the thread, which comes up, I think Roman said the best way to do it is spaces and a period. And that's the only way there really is to override the thread. You cannot just leave it blank because it will pre-populate. In fact, if I go here, you'll see I tried to delete that and it's still there. But the one that I put the spaces in and the period, that looks blank. All righty, we're gonna go back. Couple things I want to point out from the screen. Again, just to reiterate, all I have done is hovered over that brand new treatment plan document. Everything in the client session information should pre-populate. It's going to come up with the client's name, the session date, their diagnoses, and this is actually a requirement of the behavioral health rules of what's on a treatment plan. I also have gotten a little peek at what we are projecting to have some components of the updated ERT scope of work, and I can guarantee you it's going to have language in there dictating the actual requirements of what is on the treatment plan, and one of the things is the diagnoses. And so it is really important that you're getting in here and you're checking to make sure that that's added. If you notice the diagnosis is not added, my friends, that means you have not added it using the little mugshot icon. This is where we add this. So if I wanted to add another diagnosis, let's say alcohol dependence in remission, which isn't going to make sense because he has an alcohol use diagnosis. So let's pick another one. Cannabis dependence, that F12.2. I've added that. Now, if I go back, and I go back to my document, we're going to notice it's been added. So again, all of this in here should pre-populate. The other two things I want to show you is up here, this document date. This is the day that you started the document. This is going to be the day that you opened this and started it in ReliaTracks. If you need to change that for whatever reason, you can go here and we can backdate a document. Again, we really don't want to do that unless there's a very clinical reason that you are doing that. Even if I backdate this document to 11/2, I do want to let you know that's the date it's going to show up in the filing cabinet. It's not the date that it's going to have down on the signature line. But that's what that would mean. Sometimes you see things that someone inadvertently got into this document and went, oh my gosh, that's not what I want. But the document date, you go to complete it and you're like, wait, it says the document date was 5 months ago. That's how you can change it. So you can change it to today. The other thing I want to point out is this last saved portion. So if you ever get into a document that's not completed and you want to know who's been messing around in it, look for that. That should tell you under each section who the last modifying user was. All right, this video is really going to focus a lot on the ASAM. There's a lot of questions about the ASAM, what the ASAM is, how we use the ASAM, and what its purpose is. Those are really, really good questions. Let's see, I have a good graphic about this. Let's see if I can pull it up here. So the ASAM stands for the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and it helps us treatment providers place people in the right level of care. So when you hear ASAM, the next thing your brain should think of is level of care. And it does this by assessing a client's dimensions of self. And as you can see, it's separated the clients into 6 dimensions. And we're going to rate the client on a continuum scale in these 6 dimensions. The best analogy that I like to use with ASAM is kind of a medical one, which you guys know this about me at this time, is I'm always making medical comparisons. Let's assume that I am super, super sick. And so you being my friend, take me to the doctor. And you're gonna, in this situation, take me to my primary care physician. And my primary care physician assesses me and goes, oh my goodness, Sarah, you are having a heart attack. They're not going to say, let me try to treat you in-house. They're going to say, we have to call the ambulance and get you to the hospital because the care that you require is greater than we can provide in the office. They don't use the ASAM, right? Because they're not necessarily working on clients with addiction disorders, but they are using an assessment to decide the appropriate level of care. So let's talk about the continuum of care here. It starts out here at 0.5, which is early intervention. We're also going to see that is down here as well. You'll notice it works its way up to outpatient services, intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization, moving into clinically managed, low intensity residential services. Here we are at ATC. We are registered at a 3.5 clinically managed high intensity. residential services, and it moves its way up into medically managed intensive inpatient services. You'll notice the the exact same recommended levels of care here. And then again, the severity ratings are found on this up here. All right. So when we talk about a client who's presenting to our office, it's our job as clinicians to make sure that they are in the appropriate level of care. And this is really important when we look at looking for funders for clients' services. This is really convoluted and it's really not really clear right now. So we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about funding, although I do hope to bring new information to you on that. But especially in outpatient, when we are billing Medicaid, they want to make sure that we are providing the right dosing hours and the right amount of clinical care for the client based on their recommended level of care. So back to our hospital analogy. After my hypothetical heart attack, let's say that I have a coronary artery bypass and it's very intense and they put me in the ICU. And they say to my parents, Sarah's going to be in the hospital for a really long time. And we're going to start her out in the ICU. Well, the doctors are only going to want to keep me in the ICU for as long as is medically necessary. And so they're constantly going to be doing assessments to make sure that the ICU is the right place for me to be. The minute that I no longer meet medical necessity for the ICU and I can go into a lower level of care, which may be like the med surg floor, they're going to move me to that. So again, they're going to do consistent assessments to make sure that I render that level of care. And if I don't, they're going to move me to a lower level of care or higher, depending on what their assessment renders, right? Eventually, after I go to med surg for a while and I hang out there, and they're going to continue to do their assessment and they're going to decide when I can go home. And when I go home and I can have my care managed at an outpatient office, then I'm an outpatient. So let's talk about the different levels of care. Early intervention is going to be for clients who really are assessing at the none level. And that's really, when I think of early intervention, I think of high schools and I think of education programs. I think of the DARE program. I think of kind of people like us going in and being like, hey, drugs and alcohol are bad. Let's talk about how they affect your brain and how they can disrupt your life. That's early intervention. It means that at the time of our clinical assessment, our client does not have any severity in any of the 6 dimensions of care. Moving our way up to outpatient, which is defined as anywhere from up to 19 hours of, no, I lied. It's up to 9 hours of care, outpatient structured therapeutic care, 9 hours a week, 9 hours a week. I've done outpatient for a very, very long time. We hardly put people in 9 hours of structured therapy per week, although a lot of them meet criteria for intensive IOP, which is intensive outpatient, which would be 9 to 19 hours. There's not a lot of IOP programs in our areas, but if they are, they should be receiving anywhere from 9 to 19 hours of therapeutic contact. Up here into our, I'm really just going to focus on 3-5 because that's what we are. We already know what our dosing hours are in IRT. There are going to be 20 hours of direct therapy and other structured supports to equal 40. And then we have medically managed intensive services would be for people who need round the care nursing staff or medical supervision. So let's go to the top and we're going to pretend to have a client and I'm going to tell a story about our client and we're going to use the ASAM to assess him. So our client is, for the sake of this program, going to come into Alamosa. And he shows up and he says, my probation officer said, I needed to come see you in IRT. And upon our assessment, we smell alcohol on his breath and we recognize that he's not able to be very steady and he's falling asleep in the chair. And so I immediately recognize that he is under the influence of drugs and alcohol. We also know that alcohol withdrawal poses a risk for fatality. We know that you can die from an alcohol withdrawal. So I am definitely not going to mark no signs of withdrawal. I'm going to ask the client like how much he's drank, and let's say that he tells me that he's drank a couple of shooters, and he says I'm pretty intoxicated, and I have him blow into our breathalyzer, and he's pretty high BAC. I'm not going to say that he's mild or moderately intoxicated. I'm going to say probably that he is somewhere up into here, severe intoxication with a pretty severe risk of withdrawal. Or in the situation, he's pretty incapacitated, and so he has severe signs. He might have a seizure. So I'm going to go ahead and mark very serious on this. At this point, I may very well stop my treatment plan because there's no more need for that, and I'm going to get my client to detox. I'm going to work with my treatment coordinator to probably do a note under treatment contact that just says, hey, we had to get client to detox. We'll reassess his treatment plan when he returns. All right, so now we understand when and how to use the first dimension, which is substance use, acute intoxication, and or potential withdrawal. Let's go ahead and pick a different client for a case today and just say that the client says, hey, I haven't used, maybe they come from county jail. I haven't used in 4 months. Then they don't really have any active withdrawal or intoxication. So I might very well put none. Biomedical conditions and complications, I need you to look at their physical self. Do they come in with a ton of medication? Do we need to get them hooked up with psychiatry? What about medications and their physical health? Do they have diabetes? Do they have pre-existing conditions? Are they going to need an outpatient doctor? If they're seeing a doctor at outpatient, so if we're back in our Alamosa thing, they're going to Valleywide and they're seeing a doctor for their diabetes. They're seeing a doctor at the outpatient level. So that level right there would probably fit best into dimension 1. They have mild to moderate symptoms, which do interfere with their daily functioning, but they're able to cope with their physical discomfort. The Sterling folks might remember this story, but many, many years ago, we had a client who showed up to IRT, and we found out very quickly that he was unable to use the restroom by himself and that he needed support. And I actually think was using adult diapers at that point and needed help managing that. And while our programs are great, and I like to define this as generalist, and we're able to do a lot of things, we are not able to help people with their activities of daily living, especially when it comes to sanitary use of the bathroom. In that case, we would have recommended that client that we would say they have very serious medical conditions. So we might have marked a 4 at that point. If they have serious medical problems, which require intensive services, we are not able to house them in any of our IRT programs because we don't have 24-hour doctors. We don't have home health to come in and help people with their activities of daily living. So if you are going to mark a higher rating on the biomedical conditions and you're going to keep them in IRT, you need to start thinking about your rationale there. So just kind of put that negative information. All right. Dimension 3 is what we call the EBC, emotional, behavior, and cognitive conditions. And so again, this would be how is their mental health? I think about this as kind of their mental health one. If I could just kind of rate it on that continuum, are they able to, do the symptoms distract from recovery, but they don't have any threat to self or others? Maybe they have very serious mental health concerns and we need to address them, but they do not require acute levels of care. They might have impulses to harm others or to harm themselves or to just have general impulsive behavior, but it's not really dangerous in a 24-hour setting like we have at ATC. Most of our clients fall into that category. If they're coming into IRT, most of them are going to fall into that category. All right. Readiness to change. We've done a lot of training over that. Depending on your client, they're either going to be very willing to come into care, and that's great, or they might be very ambivalent. So you're gonna have to rate them there. If they're not willing to change, they're unwilling to follow through with treatment recommendations, you might have to put them at very severe. Relapse continued use. If they're in our programs, they probably have a pretty higher risk of relapse. If they're in IRT, they've probably tried on their own to maintain sobriety and they haven't been successful in reaching their sobriety related goals to date. So again, look at these different definitions here and really pick the one that fits your client. So let's put, a number 2 on that. And I forgot to change our hypothetical client. Let's put them at 2. All right, dimension 6, I get this question a lot. The recovery living environment. Does this, if they're in ERT, does this mean the recovery living environment when they're in ERT or pre-ERT? And the answer is pre-ERT, because ERT is the level of care we are trying to justify, or outpatient is the level of care we are trying to justify. So I'm more interested in their recovery and their living environment before they came to ATC. And so really, most of our clients are really going to fall in that 3 level. They have an unsupportive environment and difficulty coping, even if they've been in a clinical structure. So a lot of our clients go to outpatient, and then that doesn't work, and they end up in ERT. So most of our clients fall in that 3 level. If they're in ERT, they might fall into the 1 to 2 in outpatient. Again, this should differentiate per client. Interpreting the ASAM. As a general rule of thumb, you just want to look, and the highest level that you've assessed somebody is really where you need to look at placing them 99.9999999% of the time. So in this case, our client definitely assessed at level 3. So I really shouldn't be looking to place him. It wouldn't really be appropriate to place him in outpatient or an intensive outpatient, because he really using the ASAM assessed on, let's see, how many different dimensions? 1, 2 dimensions. So 2 out of the 6 dimensions, he assessed at 3. Now, sometimes things happen and I don't have access to a 3-5. So a great example of that is Cassie in the JBBS program. 99.999% of her clients are going to assess at a level 3. But they're currently in jail and they're incarcerated, and we can't just place them in a 3-5 because they have things like court and probation officers and I don't know, jail cells that keep them and keep Cassie from immediately placing them in a 3-5. So she needs to justify that. And the justification would look something like this. Appears to meet criteria for level 3.5 as evidenced by chronic unsupportive environment, which leads to high relapse potential and inability to cope with routine life stressors without 24-hour support. What else did he assess? Additionally, client presents with severe emotional, behavioral, and cognitive concerns, which render 3-5 LOC as level of care. However, client is currently incarcerated and will be admitted to JBBS program, providing level 1 services. Client recommended to engage with group. Might even put something as COVID restrictions allow. One-to-one life skills group until client can work towards appropriate level of care. That's a great justification, because if this is left blank, an auditor may look at something like this, or quite frankly, I might look at something at this and say, I don't understand why this individual definitely is assessing a very high level of care, and we're putting them at a very, very low level of care. Another thing I see quite frequently is that somebody will come through here and just hit none on all of these. My friends, if the client truthfully does not meet criteria or any severity in any of these dimensions, they should not be in our program. I know that's not true because I know that Roman would absolutely not admit somebody into the IRT program if they had 0 relapse or continued use potential. Every single person has a problem with substance use in some regards. So I know that there is low or no potential for relapse and they have a good ability to cope because they wouldn't be in our program. Or that they have great impulse control and there's no dangerous and their social functioning is great and their emotional, behavioral, cognitive conditions will not impact their recovery. Really trying to think of an example of when that might apply, and that might be 1 in 1,000. So again, the level of care, if you're sitting there and you go, yep, none, but you're going to jump them to a 3-5 level of care, I'm going to need to see a rationale for that. And I can't even make one up right now because I just can't compute that. Very rarely do we place somebody in a higher level of care and ration that or use rationale for that. Usually it's that they assess at much higher and we're going to provide rationale at why we're going to put them in lower level of care. The other thing I just kind of tell people is don't overthink the ASAM. When this is not meant to be something that you spend 7 hours on thinking about what level of care your client goes into. If you're inert, we are a 3-5. And if you're like, this client needs to be inert, then you need to mark 3.5 and justify why that is. You might very well put client appears to meet criteria for level 3.5 and will be admitted into the IRT program. Recommended to follow treatment interventions as recommended. We already said that, so interventions. Boom. I mean, that's how easy it is to justify a level of care that matches. If you're an outpatient, you may say something like, client appears to meet criteria for level 1.0, traditional outpatient services, client to engage in 1 time per week group, and one-to-ones PRN as needed. Something like that. The rationale doesn't have to be a diagnostic formulation. You're not justifying your diagnosis. That does happen, but we all know that happens in the substance use evaluation. It does not happen here. This is just justifying their level of care. We want to make sure that the clients are in the right place at the right time, and this is the accepted tool for us to do that. Again, the high points are making sure that when your clinical gut goes, yep, this person needs to be inert, and that's appropriate, that you're making sure that the ASAM lines up with that. You're thinking about those 6 dimensions of care, and that you are providing a rationale down here. The rationale needs to have a little bit more substance to it when the client is assessed at a higher level of care than you're going to put them in. And if they are assessing out at a level of care that you've already assessed them and everything looks kosher, just a 1 sentence like, hey, they appear to meet criteria for this, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put them in, I'm going to put them in traditional outpatient. If they assess, a lot of clients I've found really do assess out at that 2.1 level for intensive outpatient. You absolutely can put client appears to meet criteria for level 2.1. IOP services. You can say, however, due to lack of IOP programming, client to engage in weekly outpatient with treatment, to include. If they need to go to IOP, you probably should do more than 1 time per week group. So maybe we'll put 2 times per week group. Weekly one-to-ones, peer services, and support from this office. Something like that. All right. that is the ASAM in a nutshell. That is what we're looking for. Again, this is updated every time you update the treatment plan. The hope is that your client's getting better. The hope is that your client is moving down through levels of care. So if the client at time of intake really assessed for 2-1 IOP, hopefully in outpatient, we update the treatment plans every 6 months. So hopefully when I redo this in 6 months, hopefully they've gotten better. And maybe the client's recovery and living environment has gotten better and they can move from a 3 to a 2. So it is important to update the ASAM every single time that you update the treatment plan. The question I get a lot in IRT is, well, what if they don't meet criteria for IRT anymore? And I update the ASAM and they've gotten better. The one that we see gets better a lot is this readiness to change, right? They come in and they're very unaware of why they need to change and they're not going to engage. And then right at about 30 days, things start to happen and they move through this. And the answer to that is, as long as they met criteria at their first treatment plan, or as is right now, this may change in the future, but right now it's defined as a 90-day program. And so we actually want to prove progress in that. And so if they assessed at a 3.5 when they came in and they've moved down to a 2.1 by the time they were discharged, that's great. That's fine. I am more interested in you honestly and accurately documenting and clinically assessing your patient than trying to keep a 3.5 for 90 days. 3.5 was never designed to be 90 days. And so we're working with DCJ to kind of get some clarity there. But it's okay to show progress as the client progresses in IRT, and heck, we want them to, right? All right, so another big thing is no client should be assessing out at early intervention. And if they are, you need to be talking to me because we need to know how they ended up in ATC. And are we the best treatment agency for them? If you have any questions on this, let me know. I will also do a corresponding form for this, which will come out in a second email because I can't figure out how to send them in the same email. As a reminder, watching these videos is required for people if you are doing a treatment plan. So if you're doing treatment plans, it's required for you to watch this video. It is required for you to do the form. The benefit to you is that you get training hours from Christy and you have a better understanding on how to use the ASAM. Let me know if you have any questions and please bring that up in your supervision groups. Thanks.